teams of mostly software developers across the world. I must say we did not have a big focus in Ukraine. We did have in Poland, Romania, Turkey as well, a few colleagues from Ukraine, but not as much in other countries. But I think that's actually super enriching to have contributors in different teams throughout. And that's actually part of our bet in bridging. So what our belief is that companies, as they grow, they don't grow just in one location. They tend to grow and by inception to almost be like global businesses. And obviously the opportunity that well, for good or worse, the pandemic introduced is that the work location, particularly for knowledge workers, has become largely agnostic, right? So it's not necessarily relevant, if you are working in a country or the other, as long as you can produce the output that obviously your team expects from you. And so that, I believe, introduces a lot of great opportunities, also obviously some challenges. And that's as well what we want to support at Bridging is the growth of distributed companies and focusing a lot on what is the process of getting operations in different countries, what is to fight talent and all of that. So what we'll focus, and I guess getting started, I don't know if I can share the screen already, not yet. Maybe you can make me host again, please. Yes, brilliant. So I see we did not lose the recording, so that's great. And now hopefully, if technology does not fail me, you should be seeing my screen with Bridging logo at the center, yeah? All right, brilliant. So I guess I'll get started. Obviously, anyone attending later or that couldn't make it, I'm assuming you'll get access to the recording. So things to cover today, obviously, how to start business or open a subsidiary in Portugal, key obstacles and pitfalls. I will actually start by mentioning a couple of, key information about Portugal as a country. I think that's obviously relevant to know, but also what in the end, I believe will be interesting opportunities for Ukrainian startups and founders. But I hear that potentially you might also have in the audience, some IT experts, specialists. So, I'll try to take that into consideration as well. So one of the first things that I would love to start is why Portugal? Why would you even consider, one of the, I guess, smaller companies in the EU? So a couple of factors that are relevant. It is a fairly secure democracy with a very good human development index. We have been rated for several years in a row as the fairly safest country. I think we were the third safest in 2020 and down to the fourth, lost one place there in 2021. But well, still fairly safe. The first, I think, is Iceland, the second New Zealand, and honestly, I don't know who got us to the third place. Another thing you see quite a bit, obviously in the last few years, there has been a rise in autocratization and, a lot of politic power being concentrating in the hands of few. Thankfully, a lot of those movements have not really materialized significantly in Portugal, and we are fairly ranked as the 7th best liberal democracy in the world. Not to say all is good, clearly not. Arguably, we are a little bit too much to the left in the last few years, but at least there's what I think everyone in Portugal would agree, a fair amount of liberty, and unfortunately, you can't say that for all countries in the world. So that's one. The second, I would say, is historically and traditional, and I'll try to, maybe some of this is already know, but I'll try to, reiterate a couple of quick facts. Portugal historically it is a very Atlantic country. Okay, so our Portuguese history has always been a lot facing the sea and the Atlantic, way more than facing inland into Europe. Easy to understand why. We are on the Iberian Peninsula. Our neighbor is Spain, so all of our land border is with Spain. And so because of that, and because, there was obviously some fights historically many centuries ago between Portuguese and Spain, we end up agreeing on a border, And so our only option was to expand towards the sea. So, so that's why Portugal is called one of the first global empires, that we had colonies in some possessions in India, South America, and Pacific area as well. But so fast forward to 21st century, that means there is a tight connection and very Western culture, deep ties, a lot of significant expat community in North America, some countries in Europe, mostly Western Europe. For instance, France was in the 80s a target destination for a lot of Portuguese expats. I should say typically not qualified expats. A lot of them, didn't have any degree. Brazil, obviously they speak the same language. In Africa, you have big countries like Angola and Mozambique that also speak Portuguese. And a lot of these places have direct flights. So it is, when you think more, Africa, South America, but also a little bit of North America, is a fairly interesting location. Also, and we talk a lot, I can tell you that we see a huge movement from South America, particularly Brazil, to Portugal. And we see that for tech workers, talent. Obviously, Brazil is not necessarily a great place considering their currency and the exchange rate. So a lot of them have been seeking better opportunities in Portugal. And I can tell you, for instance, Web Summit was just 12 days ago or so, and there was a big amount of entrepreneurs and tech talents and teams from Brazil coming here. So that's very noticeable. But also, in a lot of companies we work with and stories of who have come to Portugal, a lot of the times is also from North America. In that sense, Portugal, if you are coming away from the continent, does introduce the access to the European Union. We have the euro, obviously, fairly stable currency. And so the region, obviously, and I'm sure you know this, right, is the second largest economy in the world. Moving on here, and this is, I would say, will continue to be very, very relevant in the next couple of years, which is the quality of living. Portugal has been ranking very, very high in a lot of aspects. Obviously, I have all the sources in this presentation, so you can refer to them later on. But is, like we already said, it's fairly secure. It's also, weather is usually nice. Today is a bright sky with sun, a little bit cold, at least for Portuguese standards, but very sunny still. People tend to like the food, good leisure activities, sports outside, a lot of things that you can do. Something that I'll cover in a little bit in a couple of slides here, but also important is English proficiency is very high. So although we are not native speakers of English, obviously, and so that means that anyone, particularly on the biggest cities, that doesn't need to speak English to get around and do everything, really. So that tends to be makes it easy to get established, right? So quality of life has been ranking number one, 2019, number one, 2018 was number two. But personal happiness, cost of living is fairly good as well. So although Western Europe, which prices tend to go up, it is still fairly low compared to other countries. Feeling at home, again, great, friendly, soft people. Typically, people will try to help you. So there's the good things about this. And again, post-pandemic, the reason why this is even more relevant is the attractiveness of the place. So I can, again, try to give you some ideas on how companies look at the country, because I think that might be relevant for you as well. I recall talking with a VP of sales for the EMEA region at Google, and he said something very interesting, which was, for us to support the sales team across Western Europe, they had a big team in Portugal. And key aspect is, well, obviously in Portugal, find people that speak Portuguese, clearly, right? You can also find a lot. The Italian community is, I think, the third largest. So you also find easily people that speak Italian. Spanish, a lot of Portuguese speak somewhat Italian. The languages are not that different. French, less common, but still easy to get. English, like I said, hyper efficiency. And then when you are missing, German, less available. If you go to Norwegian or Swedish or whatever it is, it does start to get harder. But, and this is not me, I'm paraphrasing the guy at Google, what he said was, look, you can go back, you can go to, young graduates from Sweden and say, do you want to spend 2 years in sunny Portugal working for us at Google? And, that's a pretty strong talent acquisition perspective, right? The country, low cost of living, sunny weather, working for a well-established company. So that makes the ability to be a place with quality of living to be attractive for people to choose to live or spend time in. Now, why is that even more relevant post-pandemic? Because as a lot of jobs kind of, locations start to be irrelevant, you could work from any place, you do see a lot of people converging to Portugal. I see something I have seen in the last 18 months, something that I could not believe it was true. If you would ask me 3 years ago, like North American, the typical story that we sometimes hear about the founder that got an exit, got a few millions in the pocket and is moving to Portugal. Clearly not to, not to work on the local economy, not to sell to the local economy, but as a place to live. Again, fairly safe, Eurozone, Schengen area, it's a good passport to have. Portugal does not have, thankfully, any natural enemies, right? So again, maybe because it's a smaller country, but there is nobody that wants to, create a mess with us. And so all of those make really think that is an interesting place to live. And again, I believe that's relevant. We see a lot of people, also from the Nordics, for instance, from Sweden, I have seen a lot of people relocating here, and they don't have, they have amazing social security and benefits and all of that. But, maybe people sometimes do like the sun a little bit better. So obviously personal decision, but this will be net positive in the upcoming years. I already mentioned this, so I won't spend too much time here, but Portugal does rank 7 in English proficiency, only behind the Nordics and Anglo-Saxon countries. So, fairly safe that you can get around in Portugal easily, speaking English. Notably, and again, these slides were done even before this session was prepared, but you can see that some of Eastern European countries do fare a little bit worse, but also notably Italy and Spain fare way worse than Portugal in terms of English proficiency. Okay, and that's very noticeable. Now, moving on, this is also very relevant, the skills of the workforce. So Portugal has spent quite a bit on education. So it's actually the 5th world in the country that spends more in education. That in itself doesn't mean a lot because it can be not necessarily well spent, but at least it shows the commitment from the government to spend on education. Furthermore, most people still, go to public schools, they go to public universities, and I would say in technology, the best universities are public. There's even not a significant offer in private universities. If you go to like management or business, maybe there's a 1 or 2 good private schools, but good amount of education is on public schools. I can also say, and this is very relevant when I'm talking again with North America, healthcare, although it's not the best, well, according to some statistics, they say that Portuguese healthcare is actually pretty good, one of the best in the world. We do have a very high vaccination rate for COVID and all. If you ask any Portuguese, they will probably think that the healthcare is kind of crappy, but well, maybe it's still significantly better than others. One thing for sure, you will not die without assistance simply because you don't have money to pay the doctors, which does happen, for instance, in the US, which feels crazy. But yes, it does. So again, a couple of things that are relevant. What this radar chart that you see here is from EMD World Talent Ranking, and it features 3 vectors: so investment and development, appeal, and readiness in a talent competitiveness landscape. And so you see Portugal here on the top, that significant investment, appeal and readiness not as strong. For instance, the US has a lot more appeal, meaning that traditional talent wanted to go to the US, same as Germany, actually Spain better than Portugal, for instance, also the UK obviously higher, Ireland also doing fairly good. in terms of, places where typically there were interesting tech careers, or non-tech, but a lot of them is tech. But then when you compare with the blue, which is the investment, which is a proxy signal for what to expect in the future in terms of quality of workplace, you do see Portugal faring better than the US. Actually, besides Germany does speak very good here, but for instance, way better than Ireland, way better than Brazil and other countries. Interesting enough, similar to Ukraine in terms of investment in education, apparently according to this chart, although Portugal would come here on top in terms of, again, the appeal for people to move into the country to work. So that's relevant as well. So moving on, again, I won't spend too much time here. This is just a quote for John Graham Cumming. He's the CTO at Cloudflare. You might know Cloudflare. He is living in Lisbon. He has relocated here 2 years ago, maybe. We had the event last year, so maybe you can then follow this link and watch his interview, why Cloudflare chose Portugal as a key hub for the company. But moving on, and this is also quite interesting. I hope I don't touch any nerve here, but a lot of times I'm talking with companies that look at Portugal and compare Portugal, should I hire a team or should I expand operations into Portugal or one of the countries in Eastern Europe, given that a lot of times what we hear is Poland, Romania, and Ukraine to be, kind of on the top. So that means is Portugal is put on the same bucket often with Poland, Romania, and Ukraine in terms of where to go. My personal thoughts is they are different. So maybe you should go to both and leverage the best that both countries can offer. But here are some KPIs that obviously, again, we have all the links here in red. You can click, explore all of this. Portugal is not the biggest country in the world, definitely also not in Europe. And that reflects on the size of the talent pool, right? So 93,000 professional developers, which constitutes almost 1% of the population. So although the talent pool is not the biggest, it's actually well below Poland, below Romania, and less than half of Ukraine's. The percentage of the population in this area is actually pretty interesting. But again, obviously, total number, it is lower. Then on talent competitiveness, we already saw part of this on EMDB radar chart, but we do fare a little bit better than most Eastern European countries. Skills of workforce and availability as well, faring a little bit better. We also already said that government expenditure on education per student as percentage of GDP also a little bit higher. Interesting enough, as we saw, Ukraine is not that far off from Portugal. Then European Innovation Scoreboard, a little bit higher in Portugal also than other Eastern countries. The ranking of schools, you can see that we do have a few companies on the Financial Times ranking and also on the World Top 500. And then the English skills, 7th for English proficiency. Sorry, 7th for language skills, and the English proficiency 12. Actually, this is 7 now. This is slightly outdated. We did jump up 5 positions. Other things that might be even more relevant, which are country stability and infrastructure. So again, stable political democracy, fairly, fairly decent. I won't say amazing, but not too bad. Personal freedoms and liberal democracy, that I think Portugal is doing very, very well. For those that don't know, Portugal was in a dictatorship up until 1974. So there is still a lot of living people, that fought to overthrow the dictatorship back then. So civil liberties are still taken very seriously. And I think that's obviously great, probably also because why you don't have autocratic movements as some other countries. Immigration laws are very favorable, sometimes very, or I should say all the time, very bureaucratic, but favorable, meaning that Portuguese is very welcoming to people, obviously, particularly if those migrants, they are educated or they are, well, wealthy, that tends to help. But generally speaking, they're fairly welcoming immigration laws. Open tradeness, Ukraine actually fares better than Portugal. As we saw already, Global Peace Index, quality of living, Portugal does rank among the best in the world. Infrastructure rating, not top 10, but still fairly decent. One thing that, interesting enough, also comes some time, and particularly now with tech workers, is the internet coverage. So although not 100%, there's fixed broadband coverage in 94% of the country. The prices are also fairly competitive. For instance, in Germany, you'll have worse coverage and higher prices, which feels surprising, but I guess it is what it is. Moving on here, numbers of scale-ups. So there's a decent size. Even again, comparing to the countryside, I can tell you that Portugal, in terms of tech startups, homegrown tech startups, does suffer from something, which is we had good promise, but we never had a huge exit yet. So the startup ecosystem is fairly recent, newer than in other locations. So we need, those stories of a founder that got a huge exit and now is filthy rich and starting the second startup. You still don't hear those stories, although there are, I believe now, 5 unicorns that we associate are Portuguese companies or Portuguese DNA companies. So yeah, then time to start a business, and this can be very misleading. So officially it is 6 days, although I would say don't trust that you can do everything, particularly if you are a non-resident, in less than 6 weeks. If you're a resident, sure, yeah, you can do it in a couple of days. If you're a non-resident, it's not that easy because you need to get local fiscal ID, and obviously now it's still middle of a pandemic. Some of these things are taking a little bit longer. In terms of currency, I already mentioned this. We are in euros, so that does give some stability in terms of have a stronger currency, although it has had impact for Portugal because we can't devalue the currency to cope with other stuff, other problems. But at least from an investor perspective, we are somewhat stable. I'm just seeing a message here. Yeah, feel free to put any questions you might have on the chat. We can refer to that later, don't forget. So yeah, so then time zone, obviously being west, a little bit more to the west side of Europe, there is a better time zone difference comparing to North America. Obviously within Europe is not relevant. All Europe is connected by a tops 3 hours difference, so all of that is workable. The challenge is when you need to connect with other continent. And Portugal, from that perspective, is a little bit closer. We have 5 hours different from New York, Boston, and 8-hour different from Pacific, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and so on. Which, for instance, in Ukraine, obviously it's a 10-hour different, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So it does make slightly worse. 8 hours is not great. Obviously, 10 hours is a little bit worse. So changing gears here a bit, another thing I want to focus, and this will be particularly important for anyone in the audience that is considering to hire people in Portugal, or anyone in the audience that might want to move to Portugal, to understand how much would be worth in the local, global, but still the local economy. So what we have here, this is a good salary survey by Robert Walters. I do advise you to be very careful about salary benchmarks in Portugal. Why? Because of the country being small, the data points are not always reliable. And we do see some salary benchmarks, mostly self-reported information. They are not accurate at all. This one from Robert Walters, I think the scientific behind doing it is actually pretty good. So what you can see here, is years of experience, roles, and whatever you can get. So for instance, let's look at the front-end developer, typical JavaScript, someone that is considered senior plus 5 years will be 55 to 65,000 euros gross salary per year. So that's how to read this. Obviously, more experience, higher salary; lower experience, lower salary. I can tell you that 60K euros, you can make a very good living in Portugal. Even the cost of living, very good. And particularly if you don't need to, buy or rent a house in city center, because now might not need to. It's you can purchase a house in the countryside starting what, 4 times this salary. You can have a standalone house even with a pool if you are 1 hour drive or something like for that from Lisbon. So can be very, very interesting from that perspective. But from an employer perspective, right, the gross salary is not the total cost of employment. So how does salary breaks down in Portugal? So this simulation here, we're considering a 50K gross annual salary. In Portugal, we have 14 payments or installments, so 14 months, although obviously the year has 12, but we have 1 extra month for holiday allowance, and the other one is for Christmas allowance. So 50K divided by 14 gives around 3,571 euros per month, again, times 14. There's the meal allowance. So the good thing about this is you can pay a meal allowance that is not subject to taxation, which is always great. That amount actually is higher, can be higher than this. We usually go with 683 euros per day. This is paid by working days per month. And so on a yearly basis, it would be roughly 1,649 euros. More importantly are employer costs. So on top, and I repeat that, on top of gross salary, you need to consider the following. There's a social security payment that the company, the employer, needs to do. The employee also gets deducted social security and personal income tax, but the employer needs to pay additional social security contributions on top, okay? So a 50K salary, it's not 50K cost, it's 50K plus everything that you see here. Number one, the biggest by far slice is social security contributions at the rate of 23.75%, meaning 11K. So right there, a 50K salary got 61K salary, okay? Additionally, there's the compensation funds for social security. This is sort of a guarantee should the employer go under as a company, some compensation that is due to the employee. This is 1% of the gross salary, so 500 euros. Then it is mandatory to have labor insurance, absolutely mandatory. Do not think of employing anyone in Portugal without a labor insurance, because if the person gets hurt, you will be liable, significantly liable. So please, if you ever do that, make sure you do have labor insurance. It is mandatory as well to have a medical examination before any employee starts. This is, I would say, mostly useless, but it's statutory requirement. So every employer needs to do it. Then there is mandatory training. So by law in Portugal, employers need to provide training to their employees. If they do not provide training to their employees, the employee is entitled to receive a compensation equivalent to 40 hours of his salary. So again, for 50K salary on a year, that means that the employer will need to pay about 1,000 euros more to compensate for the lack of training provided. Something that is not mandatory, but we see it more and more as fairly recommended. So the rule of thumb here is, if you want to hire someone, software developer particularly, and you don't offer private health insurance, you'll probably not be able to attract him or her simply because of it. So, again, if you are to be an employer in Portugal, do significantly consider this. If you are to be an employee looking for this, ask for it. It's common. The private health insurance is not too expensive. Again, it does depend on age and pre-existing health conditions, but on average, you can get a pretty good insurance by 40 to 50 euros per month. So that would be, around 500 per year. All right, so moving on. So to sum it up, 50K gross annual salary, meeting legal obligations, mandatory benefits, allowances, and perks is about 66 to 67K per year. This does not include working tools like laptops, monitors, all of that, any communication like internet, any fuel, car allowances, or even like workplace, office, internet, desks. There's plenty of work co-working spaces in Portugal, but obviously none of this is included. One thing that we don't have here that I do want to mention that it was recently approved, which is because of the growth in remote work, or should I say work from home, employers are now obligated to pay for employees' costs of working from home, which feels very socialist, I guess. We do have a left-wing government, but the idea is that if you are spending electricity powering your laptop to work at home, you know, that delta should be paid by the employer. You might ask, how do you calculate the delta in electricity? No one has no idea, but supposedly employers are liable to pay for those small fees, you know, extra water because you are in home, the internet package, whatever. So, you know, consider 30 euros, whatever per month for coping with home office expenses. Yeah. All right, so a breakdown here, and I think this will probably not be big news, but comparing the total cost of employment with the net salary. So although the total cost of employment on top of the gross salary grows linearly, the total cost of employment comparing to the net compensation does not grow linearly. Why? If I'm getting too confused, the explanation is our income tax bracket is progressive. So higher salaries have a higher taxation. So it's not only that the percentage applies to a higher amount, it's the percentage is higher and applies to a higher amount. So that's why you see this kind of trend here on the lines. The red, the solid line is for the net salary evolution. The dashed line is the gross salary. So you can see that for lower salaries, you know, almost everything that you pay in gross salary is net because there's very little taxation. As you grow to higher salaries, almost half of the gross salary is taxed. And then the dotted line on top is the total cost of employment that you see, you know, grows kind of linearly with the gross salary. Another way to look at this, oh, by the way, taxation does depend on the number of children that you have because there's deduction and everything. But, you know, for a 20K salary that for tech workers will be fairly low, that means that the employee gets 16K home, you know, so big chunk of it. But if you look to the other end of the spectrum, to the 80K salary, you see that the employee only gets 46. So almost half of it is gone in taxes. And if you compare this not with the gross salary, but with column in the middle, the total cost of employment, over half of it goes in taxation and employer costs. So for you to offer an employee in Portugal a salary of 80K, you need to spend 180K total cost of employment, all insurance, all liability, all social security, all of that. And the contributor only gets 46,000 net, okay? So unfortunately, this is one of the downsides in Portugal, is that taxation is quite significant. It is what it is. But, you know, I want to just let everyone obviously know about the goods and the bads. All right, so, well, this is another Jeremy Redburn, co-founder of Salsify, also one of the earliest companies that choose, in this case, Lisbon. They came from Boston. We also have an event here. You can press and watch his interview, why they chose Portugal. And now I want to focus more on, okay, let's assume that you are convinced, how you want to move forward. Also, by the way, what we do if you end up wanting to talk with Brigitte, but I'll focus less on that and more on the actual process of incorporating and options to get started. For those that were here at the beginning, I already mentioned about this, which is I truly believe that the world, particularly knowledge workers, you know, people that don't need to work from a factory floor, so they can perform their job from any location. There will be great opportunities for those folks to be able to travel around. From an organization perspective, and please note that I've been working mostly in remote first or remote friendly companies for the last 7 years. I have built fully remote distributed companies for some companies, from some tech startups from the Bay Area for the last 7 years. So, you know, I have worked with a lot of founders. So traditionally you had on-site teams, you had everyone co-located, maybe a couple of different locations, but everyone on site. And then was a huge hype also during the pandemic that everyone is distributed, everyone is fully remote. So you can be in, Vietnam, you can be in Uruguay, you can be in any country in the world. I don't believe either are the best scenarios. First, if you are fully on site, you are significantly decreasing the talent pool because you can only hire people that are willing to commute to your office. But if you are fully distributed, although you can hire anywhere in the world, it is very hard for a couple of things. One, very hard to hire junior team members and get them and coach them, enable them to learn from their peers if they don't have any peer close to them, right? That's the one. You are stuck to only hire senior folks. Number two, people tend not to consider themselves employees, but rather, freelancers, contractors, contributors. If you're working from a country, there's no one else on your company in that country. You don't talk with anyone on the country other than Zoom. The sense of belonging is not necessarily there. And then third, and something that we obviously saw, although working from home in lockdown in a pandemic is not the same as working remotely, potentially from a co-working spot or even the beach or whatever, but it does stand and it can be isolating. So what we believe will be the future is companies that change this. So instead of, they go after the talent, but they think in hubs. So for instance, a company can think, okay, I'll start a hub in Portugal, I'll start a hub in Ukraine, maybe I'll have another hub in Poland, maybe I have another hub in, Nigeria, another hub in another country. What that enables is that you can draw talent from multiple locations, but you can have in those hubs not necessarily an old-fashioned office, but you can have a place where people can meet and you can build that local culture, that local feeling. People can go for a beer at the end of the day, they can meet on Fridays, they can do something together. And for a growing business, and again, if you are a founder, if you are, a tech startup owner or other techs, you will see that culture is very relevant. Grow the team, get cohesion. So truly believe that's the ideal scenario. That's again why Bridging exists. That's our belief. That's we are building the operating system to support that. And I think you could consider that as well. Anyway, I'll skip quickly through this, but like I said, I've been managing tech business for quite some time. My co-founder as well, and our team is pretty senior here. What have we done? And more interesting is how we do it. So that I think will give you information. So one thing is soft landing. Let's say that you want to incorporate a subsidiary in Portugal. We can help you do all of that and even act as an interim country manager until operations are up and running. We can also help with relocation. That has gone up. A lot of people wanting to travel, needing visas. This is highly depending on embassies, depending on country of origin, individual circumstances, but it's something that we can help as well. Then employer of record, for those familiar with this, is the idea that if you, for instance, if you as a founder, you want to hire someone in Portugal, or you are considering to expand operations to Portugal, but you don't necessarily want to spend 3 months learning about, oh, how do I open a subsidiary? Where do I find an accountant? Where do I do this? Where I do that? And although we can do that for you, it still takes time, right? So maybe you want to, okay, let me have a business developer there, or maybe let me have like a customer success or software developer, whatever it may be, and see if this works. Employer of record is good because you can employ someone without needing to have a legal entity. You might ask, okay, but I don't need an employer of record. I just hire a contractor, which is true. Problem with contractors is that there is really no legal framework around it. Meaning, if someone is working 100% of his or her time for you, it's not an independent worker, it's a dependent worker. If him or she, even if it's not working 100% of the time for you, but has financial dependence of you, meaning, for instance, they have 2 customers, but 80% of their invoicing or income is coming from you as an employer, there will still be a dependent worker. And why is that notion of dependent worker important? Because if you have a dependent worker and you don't provide employment, arrangement, you don't pay Social Security, you can get fined. In all honesty, if you stay in Ukraine, the Portuguese authorities will not chase you in Ukraine, obviously. But if you plan to open a subsidiary in Portugal and come here, you can be having a bad surprise of getting fines because of the previous folks you had as contractors before. We are working with the company headquartered in New York right now because of this. They have about 20 contractors. They started and they are very afraid right now. And so they want to create the subsidiary ASAP so that they onboard everyone as employees. Actually, we are doing employer of record for them right now while they don't incorporate, so that they, decrease that risk. So that's from an employee perspective. If you are an employee, why would this be relevant? Let's say that you work for a Ukrainian company, but you want to personally, family, whatever reasons, you want to relocate to Portugal. But your company in Ukraine say, oh, but I can't employ you in Portugal. Well, we can employ you in Portugal and invoice your company in Ukraine, and you'll have, all the taxation done, all the Social Security contributions, all the insurances taken care of. So that's obviously another thing that is relevant with people's mobility. PEO, payroll, well, it's kind of the same thing. Sometimes we don't employ people, but we just take care of the people management framework, including payroll, benefits, expenses, taxes, and so on. So in essence, soft landing in Portugal, we can act as an interim country manager, provide a bridge, well, hence the name bridging, to a lot of local players, from law firms, accountants, PR agents, co-worker, real estate brokers, so many different things. But I want to give time to focus on what I believe is more important. So employer of record stepped approach. This is something that we've seen with much success. We've completed this process with a company from Arizona in the US. We are completing this. We are doing this process now with the company headquartered in Malta. We are doing this other company in New York. And we have another company in Norway and another in Denmark that will follow this process as well. And the process is, while we are building their team here, Bridging acts as employer of record. So instead of you coming, dealing with all the bureaucracy, spending time to incorporate a company only then to be able to hire people, no, we turn this around. So you find people, we employ people through us, employer of record. And then when you get to the certain size, you are confident that the market is working, that you can get the talent, that the market is relevant from business development perspective, whatever may be, you incorporate. So we kind of turn things around, greatly reduce the uncertainty and the risk. So in this approach, the first step would be actually to get the team, sourcing of candidates, interviewing, selection, onboarding, being all the work allocation by you. So this is not outsourcing. We just take care of payroll, okay? You manage every contributor manually. But then on a phase two, we would help you incorporate the subsidiary and internalize the team. So we would prepare the legal entities, incorporate, onboard the team as employees. Something always relevant to explain is apply to available incentives from the government, define all the framework, people management, benefits, recruitment process, so on and so forth. So like I said, we've done this for multiple companies. It's a great way to get started faster, reduce risk, and work with someone, iron out all the questions you have as you move forward. So soft landing processes. Let's focus now on what you need to know about creating a business. And I'm getting close to the end of the slides here, so hang on tight, just a couple more. So soft landing timeline plan. Although, as we saw earlier, you can, if you're a resident, incorporate in a few days. That's not a realistic plan if you're coming from a different country. We like to give 6 weeks for subsidiary creation, and I'll get into a bit more detail what we need to do. Then the second part, if you had already EORs, if you need to bring people from other countries, you to build up processes, again, you need to find brokers to insurances. We need to establish all of those relationships. We like to give 4 weeks. And then, again, everything is obviously optional. We can also provide the ongoing payroll and admin from that point onwards. Now, getting it into a little bit more detail in both of these 3 steps. So subsidiary creation, how do we typically do it? So, well, obviously you can come here and do everything by yourself. But if you're not, solutions are you, through a power of attorney and the mandate, you can nominate someone to incorporate a subsidiary for you. Okay, so that's one. Who does it, right? Is it you, or is it someone nominated by you? Second, you need, well, two things. Is a subsidiary you want to create? If it's a subsidiary, it will be an operation company under a holding company, right? If it's an operation under a holding, we need to have a fiscal number for the holding company. So the holding company needs to have a local fiscal number, a representation locally in the tax authorities to do anything, even before we begin doing anything. If you don't want to have a holding company, you want to create your own company, as you as an individual are the owner, the shareholder, you also need to have a local fiscal number, okay? You might or might not be a resident, but you need to have a local fiscal number. And you might need, from companies that are outside the EU, holdings included, you do need to have fiscal representation for the holding company. So meaning you need to have someone local, there is your fiscal representation. Then the next step is, after you get all the fiscal numbers for the shareholders, for the owners, is to get name admissibility. So in here, you might read online if you're really serious about this. You probably already saw, we have even an ebook on our site about this. You can select kind of a preset empty shell of a company. This is provided by the government, so not shady at all, okay? But that already comes with a name, okay? But it's like a random generated name. So something like, I don't know, yellow stairs, or, red dish, which means nothing. So if you want, to have your own name or the name of your group of companies or whatever, you need to submit a request for name admissibility, and they check if there is no overlapping, if it's a unique enough name. This takes 1 to 2 weeks. It needs to be paid, small fee, 50 to 100 euros, depending on the urgency you put on the request. Then you need to decide on the legal entity form and registration, meaning, do you want a limited liability, which is the regular case? Do you want a public company? Does the company has multiple owners or only one owner? All of that changes. Next, you need to select the activity code. So when you create a company in Portugal, you need to select what sort of activity you will be developing, and that has implication in terms of taxation. For instance, if you are on a sector of activity, you will be able to put in expenses that will be recognized as valid in that sector of activity. For instance, if you have IT development software company, obviously laptops and training and stuff like that is valid expenses. If you have agriculture activity code, well, laptops are fairly ubiquitous, right? But some things that make sense for tech don't make sense for other sectors. You need to define articles of incorporation, so the statute when creating the company. You need to open a bank account, and this is one of the most thorniest and hard steps. You will, unless you nominate someone to be the interim country manager, you need to be on site. Banks don't like to, they don't open without you being here. There might be a few that kind of try, but it's not necessarily legal way of operating. So you need to plan to be here or to have someone nominated to be the interim country manager, even if for a short while, to create the company and be able to sign to open the bank account for you. Then you need to open activity with the tax authorities and Social Security. And lastly, you need to do the end beneficiary registration. This is a fairly recent. Again, I don't know how this is coming through to the audience here, but Portugal can be very, very, very bureaucratic, unfortunately. The end beneficiary registration was made into law in 2019, I believe, and the reason why it is to avoid tax havens and money laundering. So the idea is that you always need to identify every relevant shareholder, flesh and blood shareholder, meaning if you have a company that is owned by a company, that is owned by a company, that is owned by the company, so on and so forth, doesn't matter. The tax authorities need to know who is the person in the end of the line. Doesn't matter how complex it is, you need to identify all of them. And you need personal details about all of them. Okay, so this is, like I said, feels intrusive, but is the law. Is a measure to prevent money laundering and tax havens and all of that. The other thing you need for any company creation is obviously an office address. You need to have a local post office to receive mail and other stuff. Now, the second column here, ramp up operation. So what we are talking here is typically you need to find accountants, tax specialists, you need to have insurance brokers. If you are to employ people, you need a bill card broker. You need to have work contracts, obviously, to employ people. You do need to sign a work contract to employ people in Portugal. And then onboarding of employees, you need to do also a lot of stuff. Namely, you need to add him to the labor insurance. You need to add them to the private health insurance. You need to conduct the health examination. You need to add to any additional benefits that you are providing. Also note that in the law in Portugal, you need to provide the same or very similar benefits to all your task force. You can't say, oh, this employee has private health insurance and the other doesn't just because I don't want to provide him or her. No, it needs to be universal. You need to prepare and add any employee to Social Security, prepare the tax payments, start the activity there, and also procure working tools and conditions, namely if you are going to a co-working space or anything like that. And then from an ongoing perspective, for you to have an idea, you create a subsidiary, you have onboarded, you have contributors there. Okay, what is my effort ongoing? You need to have, obviously, payroll, salaries and benefits processing on a monthly basis. You need to pay personal income tax, social contributions on a monthly basis. If you have employees that have expenses, you need to process reimbursements. Also note, by the way, in Portugal, every expense needs to have a VAT invoice to follow. For instance, you have a sales rep in Portugal, sales rep goes on a meal, is eating lunch with a customer, pays for the lunch, wants to get paid by the company for the amount of that lunch. If he does not get you a VAT invoice that he has got the restaurant, and the VAT number obviously needs to be of the company cannot reimburse him. Okay, so this is very bureaucratic, but it is what it is. If you don't have that paper, that expense will not be recognized in financial, and you'll pay not a fine, but you'll get penalized because you will pay profit tax on it, income, corporate tax, I mean. Financial and tax compliance. So there's monthly accountant, there's quarterly VAT payments, yearly reports and compliance. There's financial reconciliation. If you have a parent entity, a holding, you'll probably want to have some reconciliation from the local statements, local books with the parent entity. Some of the companies also need help here, which is a virtual desk, so someone to process email, pick up phones eventually, and also the managing director of record, sorry, not or, should be off, which means, if you're not here and you need someone to sign paperwork locally with providers, someone that can sign that on your behalf. That can again be someone that is nominated as the managing director, an interim managing director, or can be someone through a power of attorney, as long as in the company constitution, it is written that someone through a power of attorney can have the right to control the company. If it's not written there, the power of attorney signed afterwards, it's not accepted anywhere. So it's kind of voided. So be aware of that, particularly if you're not planning on being local and you want to have a subsidiary here. All right, so this is a case study from one of our customers, the one in Malta. And just to wrap up, last slide here. So what is my belief? Obviously, you might have different thoughts on the opportunities for Ukrainian startups and founders, is to look at Portugal as a tech destination that is, very stable, fairly stable in terms of both the democracy, but also safe from a personal perspective. The location, obviously, it is, a little bit to the west than Ukraine. It does get closer, like we said, Africa, Brazil, or South America, and also North America. We are precisely on the same time zone as the UK, which is 1 hour earlier than Central European time. So right now we are about to get to 6 p.m. here. The other thing is talent. Although we do not have a huge talent pool, there is very good education in STEM. And more important, Portugal is an attractive hub for expats, meaning a lot of people do not mind relocating to Portugal at all. So that will continue to grow the talent pool. I can even tell you something that I haven't mentioned here. One of the biggest cohorts of people we've also seen coming to Portugal are folks in the blockchain crypto space. Okay, there's a huge growing community about that. And if you ask why, well, reason, I think one of them at least, is that we do not have taxation on crypto gains, right? So if you bought Bitcoin at $1 and is selling now, I don't know, 60 something thousand US dollars, you will not pay tax on it. Traditionally in Portugal, we never pay tax on Forex, and crypto is seen as, you know, currency, so you don't pay anything. So it is quite interesting, and a tremendous amount of people have been relocating here. So that attractiveness to expats and a fairly welcoming nature, together with, you know, top English skills, does make Portugal an interesting destination. I would argue that maybe you want to have, you know, like I said, the distributed team, one hub in each country. That feels definitely interesting because you can leverage both talent pools. Think if you want to, you know, look at Western Europe, the English proficiency, Spain, you will be having a much harder time to speak in English there. Italy, the same. France, worse than Portugal, better than Spain. You know, so that's relevant as well. And that's it. Last slide, my contacts, email pedro@resin.pt. So I would love, we are precisely on 1 year deadline. So I would love to take any questions, although I didn't see anyone coming from the chat. Maybe you're just too shy or you fall asleep, but happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, we have
one. Yeah, 14 months, absolutely. So Victoria, yeah, in Portugal we have 14 months, like what, I guess whatever, right? It is what it is. But the idea behind it, let me go back where I had that. So the 14 months are, well, the 12 months of the year, obviously, plus holiday allowance, plus a Christmas allowance. Okay. Traditionally, the Christmas allowance is paid in November. So, you know, in about 10 days from now, when processing the payroll, you would process the November salary plus the holiday allowance. Okay. And then, not the holiday, the Christmas allowance. And then the holiday allowance, it is usually paid in the summer. Some companies do in June, other companies do in July, but typically you would do the same thing. You'd process July salary plus the holiday allowance. Now, let me add, just to make things a little bit more complicated, I'm sorry. 10 years ago, about 9 to 10 years ago, it was made mandatory that those two extra allowances were not paid in this cadence, but rather distributed across the other months. And this was because Portugal had like a bailout from the European Union. And so that was a measure of trying to, you know, increase the monthly average income. But that now is not the default. You can still pay in what we call the 12th, which is take the 14 months, divide it by 12 and pay the same every month. You can do that, but that's not the default. And if you think from an employee perspective, paying the allowance on summer and on Christmas means that you need to have the balance in the bank at that point, but you know, you save that cash flow for later. You know, so if you're really good at managing the cash flow, it's better for the employer that way. So it's 2 months for obligatory holiday for employee. No. So 1 month is holiday allowance, another month is Christmas allowance. Vacation in Portugal, mandatory vacation is 22 days. Okay, it was 25 days some years ago. Again, with the bailout, the European Union and the FMI or the IMF forced us to reduce that to 22. It will eventually go up again to 25, but right now it's 22. You can offer more, but the minimum is 22. Or should I say 2 days per worked month. Obviously, you work 11 months, you get 2 per month, 2 times 11, 22. Did I answer the question? Allowance is like a bonus salary. No, it is not. So allowance, Christmas and holiday are mandatory. They are not bonus, depending on, you know, performance. They are mandatory. If you want to think, just what you can think of it is like, and no, I have this discussion super often across Europe. You'll find very different situations. You'll find countries that have 13 months, countries that only have 12, countries that have 14. It's kind of all over the place. Think of it gross annual salary, and then the way you divide it doesn't matter. But from an employer cost perspective, think gross annually. So you offer someone 50K, doesn't matter if it's divided by 12 or 14. Well, it matters on the payroll, but the expense for the creation of the job is still 50K, no matter how it is divided, right? All right, thank you. So hopefully that got somewhat clearer. Any other questions?
Hello?
Anyone?
Maybe everything is clear.
Well, either that or everyone fall asleep. So one of the two for sure. I know it's a little bit late. It's is it 8 or 9 already?
8.
8, so 2 hours difference, yeah.
Yep.
All right, so I hope this was somewhat helpful. I know it's a lot of information to unpack, but the key thing is that you have a very informative session. I say everyone on my team and every person that we talk to, I love talking with different founders and people that either to work or create businesses or whatever do choose to come to Portugal. I think Portugal, like I said, is fairly welcoming, number one. Second, we have a negative, so our population is shrinking. So we need expats, we need talented people to come in, or else we'll keep decreasing as population. And I think that's also why there's this very kind of welcoming. You don't, you might hear otherwise. Obviously, I do know that a few years back there was some migration from Ukraine of not necessarily qualified workers. Portugal went through the same thing. Like I said, we had huge migration waves in the 80s and even 90s to France. So very unskilled labor, a lot to work in construction, cleaning. If you go back to the 60s, we had a lot of migration from Portugal to Brazil, which is super interesting because now Brazilians are coming to Portugal. But, a few decades ago, Portuguese were coming to Brazil. And you know what they were going to do there? Construction and bakeries. Portuguese are known in Brazil to open bakeries by whatever reason. I guess we have good bread, maybe. So this movement of people, I think it's very enriching. And so, we have another question. Mandatory training. Yes, great question. So training is again preamble. Portuguese, most of the Portuguese government, if you look through the last 4 decades, most of it has been on the moderate left government. So it is kind of socialist. I wouldn't say communist, I would say socialist. What that means is that, for instance, we still have a more liberal than France and Germany, where there's the unions of workers are super, super tight and request a lot of things to employees, which, can be good or bad, whatever. But we still have a very, socialist policies and rules. So a lot of them are built to a workforce that we are not really addressing here, meaning for a lot of tech workers, they don't care a lot about this stuff that is made in the law, but it is still in the law. Now, training, to address that. So training should be certified training by a local entity, which absolutely sucks. But again, it's the law, right? So it's called locally JERT, which is an entity that certifies the entities that provide training that can be considered to fulfill the mandatory obligation of provide training. What does that end up happening is that companies that want just to, do it, comply with the mandatory obligation, that don't necessarily care about what training they are providing, they just go with like the basic stuff, like health and safety as work, like CPR, first aid kit, and that sort of training, which it's not bad. But a tech worker would love to maybe get some AWS training and not necessarily how to do CPR on someone, particularly if he's working from home where he doesn't see anyone. So But some companies do that just to fulfill the requirement, and that's it. But yeah, it needs to be certified training, and that causes the big challenge is how can you provide meaningful training that is also certified? That sometimes is the challenge.
Victoria, you can unmute yourself if you want.
I said just thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. No, but yeah, but it's a common thing. I can tell you one thing that is not here, but well, I guess I'll just use 2-3 minutes to talk about it, is the work contract types. So you have obviously, permanent work contract where you employ someone supposedly forever and ever, although nothing is forever and ever, but I guess they still think it's like that. So, you get into a permanent work contract, supposedly you get hired and you won't be let go. Probation period for that, 3 to 9 months, usually 6 months. 6 months is for like a degree of complexity, like a software development. It's justifiable to have a 6 months probation period. 9 months is only for a position of trust, like a manager, a co-manager, a CFO, something of high trust, not a tech worker. 3 months are for the non-tech workers, someone that is not doing specialized work. You can't argue that they need to have 6 months probation. That's a permanent. What is the big downside of permanent work contracts? Is that it can be almost impossible to let someone go after the probation period. You can only let people go by gross negligence. The guy like lit the office on fire, kicked the client, or something like super clear and severe. Collective firing, where you fire everyone. And what is the other one? Oh, extinction of the job position. Let's say, you were a tech company, but you pivot the business and you are now a hostel. You fire all of your software developers and you only employ like clerks at the hostel, right? The problem with that is you can't hire software developers again for the next 2 years, I believe. Because if you fire someone because you were closing the position, you can't simply start rehiring, closely after. So permanent work contracts, really hard, significant liability. Moreover, there is no cap in the liability. So from an employer perspective, you can't even bake in, okay, so I'll employ this person. If 6 months and 1 day he starts dragging his or her feet, I can't let him go, but I'll pay an indemnification and he will, leave. No, like if the guy wants to be really bad, he will drag the employer to court and ask, potentially whatever. And there are not one or two, there are unfortunately a couple of stories where people, they were let go, they don't agree, they didn't want to be let go, even with the payment, the severance payment. They didn't want to be let go, they put the employer to court. Justice sometimes is not super fast in Portugal, so it could take, a couple of years. And they win the cases in court. And so the employer needs to reinstate that person in the job 2-3 years after and pay 3 years of salaries that he was not working. So it is really bad. So be aware of that. Is always to live in good terms, and permanent work contracts does have some liability. Now, alternatives to permanent work contracts. You have term, well-defined term or fixed term, and uncertain term. So both contracts are with the term, with an end, right? So they are not forever, okay? Then you have the fixed term. For instance, you have a lady that is, it will be a mother, and for 6 months you need someone to replace. So you sign with the person for like a 6 months contract. In the end of the contract, you go separate ways, okay? That's a possibility. Big downside of that is that after the probation period, and on a 6 months contract, the probation period is only 1 month. So 1 month and 1 day, if that contributor starts not to perform great, you need to bear with him or her for 6 months. Again, I'm kind of putting it in the, the worst scenario possible, just to give awareness. But yeah, because if someone starts, there's a drop in productivity, but he doesn't miss work, he doesn't beat anyone, he doesn't do anything serious, there is a clear motive to fire him or her, it can be really hard. So that's the fixed term. The uncertain term is a little bit better, but you need to have a good justification for it, which is uncertain term contract is, for instance, oh, I had an employee and that employee is on has some serious disease and he's on leave, but I don't know if he'll be on leave for 3 months or 3 years, right? So you sign a contract with someone that is uncertain, but contingent on something. There needs to be a reason why. And the reason might be replace this person while he is sick. Or a different reason could be, oh, we just got a huge project from a customer and we need to temporarily increase the staff, but we don't know when the end will be because it is contingent on ending that project, right? So that might be a justification. That's the best work contract for an employer because it does have a well-defined liability and you can let people go with shorter notice, okay? The liability has increased, but is right now 24 days per year of work. So equivalent to 44 days payment, or a little bit more than, oh, there's someone in the waiting room. Maybe he came late, but I'll let him in. There's a well-defined indemnity. So that's good because it enables, you to forecast. So yeah, so that's it. So there's quite a bit, and a lot of times, when we work, I already mentioned this, in Europe, you get all sorts of regulations regarding jobs, right? Countries that are way more protective, countries that are way less protective. A key area where we do work also quite a bit is North America, as I said. And for a company in the United States, this idea that you can't let someone go, it's ludicrous. They don't understand it. Why can't you let someone go, Even the UK, which is a little bit more protective, you can let someone go supposedly if there is a productivity issue, and as long as you have had like a plan to recover and you provide training for the person to improve. But if that's not enough and you can prove that that is not enough, you can still let that person go based on performance. In Portugal, it is really hard to argue that. Really hard. Sorry, that was more than 2 minutes. But
it's okay. It's really useful. Thank you. Okay. We have...
Thank you so much. It was very interesting.
My pleasure. So I guess I'll send over to you the slides if you want, or maybe just a recording is worth it, whatever, and you can share it.
It will be great
with everyone.
Yeah, it will be great. And after today's event, we will send the recordings and the presentation as well to all participants who registered in the event.
Right, brilliant. And everyone feel free to connect, get in touch or whatever. And
thank you.
If you're in Lisbon, also happy, agenda willing, hopefully, and COVID willing, hopefully we don't get into a new lockdown here, but who knows, right? But happy to meet any of you if you're around.
Thank you.
Right.
Really appreciate it. Okay.
All right, should I end? Well, you know what? I'll make you host again so that you can make the honors.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for the time today. Hopefully this was helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, it will be great.
All right. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.